Pro Football Focus currently has Miami's Rueben Bain, not just as the best defensive line in the country, not just the best defensive player in the country, but the best player in college football right now.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I am Alex Donno, University of Miami alumnus, co-host of Locked On ACC and host of Postgame on the Hurricanes Radio Network. And thank you so much to the everydayers for making Locked On Canes your first or your second listen. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this episode with our special guest, we're going to talk about draft prospects on the Miami Hurricanes roster right now. There's a lot of them in the class of NFL class of 2026, I should say. We'll get an early look ahead to Miami versus Florida State, keeping in mind, going to learn a little more about Florida State when they take on Virginia on Friday night. Miami's got the bye week, but we're going to open up with the phenom, the Category 5 Hurricane that is Rueben Bain. We have the pleasure now of being joined here on Locked On Canes by Dalton Wasserman, Pro Football Focus, and the co-host of the PFF College Football Show. And you and Max Chadwick, Dalton, have been crushing it. I love the content, especially the Miami content, the game previews, the post-game shows you guys do are always loaded with information. And, you know, on your recent episodes, anytime you guys talk Miami, it always seems to, the conversation always leads off with Rueben Bain, who's just on a tear. And I rely on people like you for the analytical side of it. So what do the numbers say about the start that Rueben Hurricane Bain is off to this season?
To be honest with you, the numbers say he's been the best player in the country. Not only is he the highest graded defensive end, not only is he the highest graded defensive player, he is the highest graded football player in the country on our scale, a 95.8 PFF grade. Just ridiculous stuff that he's doing. And it's a balanced effort for him. Bain is such a good pass rusher, but he's also maybe the elite run defender in the country, a 92.3 pass rush grade and a 92.6 run defense grade. He holds that for a whole season. He's on his way to some legendary stuff, and I would say at that rate almost a lock for a top 5 selection in next year's draft.
Wow. And yeah, it's one, like, I see some sites already kind of putting him as like the number 1 draft prospect. Obviously, you know, he's got to keep doing what he's doing, and you also have to wonder if somebody's going to reach for a quarterback potentially, even if he is the number 1 guy.
Yeah, no, I think, look, the quarterback situation is always different when it comes to the draft because teams reach because that's the most important positions. Yeah. But I think right now when I look at it, the 2 best football players in the country eligible for this year's draft are Rueben Bain and Caleb Downs, the safety from Ohio State. Those are the 2 guys that I think stand above the rest. I came into the year thinking Caleb Downs is the best football player, but boy, Bain is making a big run at it. And it's not just against, you know, there's so many guys early in the season that rack it up against FCS teams and bad teams and things like that. He's played a Notre Dame team that has a top 10 to 15 offensive line. He's played a USF team that is ranked and was playing really good football and beat Florida the week before. And then he did that to Florida, who has, I would argue, a top 10 offensive line in the country. What Bain and the Hurricanes are doing to opposing offensive lines is just ridiculous, and it's the biggest reason for their success right now.
Yeah, and you and Max covered this on your post game from Miami versus Florida. That didn't Miami force Florida into the worst offensive line grade in Pro Football Focus history. Do I have that right?
For the Florida Gators, yes. I'd have to
go
for
the Gators into their worst grading. Okay.
I would. It was their worst grade by a pretty wide margin. I'd have to see if there's some other performance because you know how it is when like a FCS team plays Georgia or something like that. But for the Florida Gators, for sure, and certainly, you know, after the second review, the pass blocking grade went up from like a 2 to an 11, which is still atrocious. So it was the worst performance that we've ever seen from the Florida Gators in 10, 11 years of doing this. And it's pretty darn near the bottom, at least in the category of some of the worst we've ever seen. That's how good Miami's D-line was.
So on Rueben Bain, and this is not to take away from him at all. This is actually to also prop up, his running mate on that defensive line, Akeem Mezador, who's also having a great year. Like, how does Mezador's presence, and he's not far behind Ruben in his PFF grades. Like, how much does it help Bain that they can't give him a whole lot of extra attention with Mezador on the other side.
Exactly. Look, great players make each other better, especially when you talk about rushing the passer and the attention and the slide protections that have to happen on the offense. You make that choice. Do you go, is it going to be number 4 that we allocate all the resources to, or is it number 3? Who do we leave one-on-one? If you try to distribute it evenly, things get a lot harder. Do you go max protection, like a 7-man protection, but then you've only got 3 receivers going out in the pattern? So, I mean, there's so many decisions that have to be made, and that's why this Miami team is so dangerous, because it's not just Rueben Bain, right? You've got Akeem Mezador on the other side off the edge. You've got guys like Ahmad Moten on the inside who are playing really well. It is right now the hardest team, at least up front, to defend in the country, because there is top-end talent and there is depth. And you mentioned it with Mezador. Rueben Bain leads all defensive players in PFF grade. Akeem Mezador is the 7th highest rated defensive end in the country. You have 2 of the top 7 edge defenders in the country. It's going to wreak havoc on opponents' offensive lines, and schematically, it's so hard to deal with.
Well, we're here with Dalton Wasserman from Pro Football Focus, PFF College Football Show. I want to pick his brain when we come back on some of Miami's other, NFL draft prospects, because they're and we were talking about this a little bit off air. Miami has a lot of guys who are candidates to be drafted this coming season. So you want to keep it locked right here. We're only getting started on this brand new episode of Locked On Canes. It's almost the weekend, and it's time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash streaks, saving more every time you order, these players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. For your Miami Hurricanes, Rueben Bain delivered in a big way. Bain against Florida, 7 tackles, 10 quarterback hurries, a half sack, a tackle for loss. When the pressure was on, Bain came through. No hesitation, no delay. And if you've been paying attention week after week, that performance was not a fluke. Rueben Bain is on a streak. And just like Bain delivered for the Canes, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays. With DoorDash streaks, you save every time you order. Stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 on DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period goes through November 18th. We're also proudly brought to you by FanDuel. NFL season is here. FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet. Player props, building a same-game parlay, even jumping in live as the action unfolds. It makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup. It is quick, easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to your Saturdays and Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. Thank you so much for making Locked On Canes your first listen. We're available free wherever you get your podcasts. We're free on YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're joined by Dalton Wasserman, Pro Football Focus, PFF College Football Show. All right, so we already mentioned a couple of them there because Akeem Mezador is also draft eligible. Who else do you think? There's a lot of guys on Miami's defense and offensive line who are going to be draft eligible this coming season. Who do you think are some of the other prospects out there?
I mean, I think the obvious one right now is Francis Mauigoa. A lot of people are expecting him to be taken in the first round, and there's been added value to right tackles, even if he stays at right tackle in the NFL. You saw a guy like Armand Membou go 7th overall last year. I think Mauigoa is the obvious one. It's going to be a lot of chatter about Carson Beck, obviously, with the wide open QB1 race that we have across college football. Some guys are playing great, some guys not so great early in the season, trying to figure it out, and it depends what teams are looking for in their quarterbacks. But you mentioned it. It's Mezador. It's Moten, a guy like Ahmad Moten up front. I think Mark Fletcher, the running back, is going to get a lot of looks because even in smaller samples before this year, he had played well. It's just that, say take last year, he was the second fiddle to Damian Martinez, right? But his missed tackles force numbers have always been good. Yards after contact, he's just going to be a solid, fundamentally sound back that teams are going to like. There's just so many right now, especially when you look at the trenches. There's probably 3 or 4 offensive linemen. You look at a guy like C.J. Daniels at receiver. The defensive line is loaded. I mean, Keontae Scott in the secondary. There's a reason this Miami team is undefeated and looking like a top 5 team because they're loaded with NFL caliber talent.
Let's zoom in on Carson Beck here for a second, who, coming into the 2024 season at Georgia, his stock was soaring. Stock went down last year. He's trying to raise his stock back, kind of like what Cam Ward did last season. What's your take on Carson, who looked fantastic first 3 games at Miami? The passing game was out of sync. Dalton, I thought in the Florida game, which was pretty obvious by the numbers and by the eye test. So how do you view Carson Beck as a possible draft prospect?
I do think Carson Beck is an NFL quarterback. Now, do I think he's maybe one of the elite guys with elite tools that's going to go top 5 or 10 in the draft? I think there's going to be some things that prevent that, right? He doesn't have an A-plus arm necessarily. He doesn't have a whole lot of mobility, so he's not going to really add much to the run game, but he's an NFL-level processor with a quick release, and when he's clean in the pocket, he's really accurate. Just like he's been in college, he's a guy who is a bit dependent on his supporting cast, right? If he goes to an NFL team with a solid supporting cast, I think he could be a solid starter. If he doesn't wind up doing that, even if he doesn't reach that capability, I think he is at least a high floor backup. He's probably, the way he's playing this year so far, at least a top 100 pick. I think that's pretty safe. And Carson Beck, you know what you're getting out of him. You just have to be able to provide him, especially with the pass protection, to allow him to get into his skill set.
Well, on that pass protection, let's zoom in on Francis Mauigoa, who is widely projected to be a first-round pick. I mean, he's a junior who has started every single game going back to his true freshman season. That dude is just built differently coming out of IMG Academy. What do you think is the future for CC? And also, I guess the wrinkle for him is he's, been a full-time right tackle in college. Does that, not being a left tackle, or at least not having collegiate experience, does that affect his draft stock at all?
It might affect it. Now, in my eyes, it shouldn't, because I'm a believer that right tackles are as valuable as left tackles, right? I know there's this whole thing about the blind side and all this stuff, but I think it's just as valuable. And you're seeing that. The good teams right now, look at the Philadelphia Eagles, the Detroit Lions, the Chargers before Rashawn Slater got hurt. I'll take what the New York Jets are trying to do with Fashanu and Membu, understanding that both of those positions are honestly equally important. I think it's a big part of the process. So I don't think teams should go out there looking at Mauigoa going, hey, should we switch him to the left side? Is he more valuable on that left side? Leave him where he's at. He's proven he's an All-American caliber player as a right tackle. Leave him at right tackle. And if you want a left tackle, well, maybe find somebody else, or maybe you make that switch or figure it out as you go. But I think at the end, and look, even a guy like Penei Sewell, he came out of Oregon as a left tackle and they switched him. So maybe he's got the talent to switch. And if not, just put your best 5 out there. Just draft talented guys and figure it out as you go. But I don't think the fact that he's a right tackle should diminish that at all.
Amen to that. Dalton Wasserman is with us, Pro Football Focus, PFF College Football Show. All right, I know Florida State still has to play Virginia on Friday night. So I know that this is kind of up in the air, but I'm really looking forward to when you and Max do your pregame conversation for Miami versus Florida State. What are you thinking so far? Like, how do you see Miami and FSU matching up in Tallahassee next week?
The interesting part, and I think schematically, that Florida State is the toughest opponent left on Miami's schedule, not just for the highest ranked bid and they're on the road and all the rivalry and all of that stuff. But I think the toughest challenge for me right now, especially early season and preparing for Florida State if I'm a defense, is Gus Malzahn and all of the different looks that they showed you against Alabama. And he's always had all that deception in the run game. Florida State's offensive line, by our grading, has not been a dominant unit, but Malzahn creates space for his athletes with all the motion and the option looks, and Thomas Castellanos with all the mobility that he has. Miami fans are obviously familiar with him from his time at Boston College. I just think what Malzahn brings is maybe, just maybe, the one answer to, okay, how can we get around this maybe the best defensive line in the country, just because of all the different looks. Malzahn stresses out your second-level defenders, your linebackers and safeties to be in the right spot at all times, because if they're not, that's when they gash you for those explosive runs on the outside.
I think that's a great breakdown, and I know you guys are going to dive even deeper on that next week. Last thing, big picture for Miami. Obviously the AP has Miami number 2, behind only Ohio State. Well, how does the PFF grade and ranking? Where do you guys have the Hurricanes right now?
Max makes his top 25 every week, and he has Miami at number 1 right now. And even in our grading scale, we have an overall team grade here on the website, and they are 3rd in the nation behind Indiana and Texas Tech. And bear in mind that those two teams have really only played one real opponent and have dominated everybody so far in the schedule. So when you look at, we don't have it, schedule weighted. It's something I want to talk to some people behind the scenes to get at, if we can ever weight the grades to strength of schedule. But I mean, you really look at it, Miami's been the best team in the country considering their schedule and the way that they've performed, the tape that we have on them. Obviously, the Florida game maybe for a bit was closer than we thought, but that's still an SEC team with a lot of talent. The Notre Dame game took a lot, and Notre Dame charged back, but Miami found a way to win. This dominance that they have in the trenches is going to keep them as an elite football team for the rest of the season. And I really believe, I'll be honest, and I know looking ahead on schedules and things like that, there's a couple more tough games. But if they get through these next 2 against Florida State and Louisville, I don't think I see them losing a game through the regular season.
Wow. I love it. Make sure you follow Dalton on X at PFF_Dalton. Check him and Max Chadwick out on the PFF College Football Show. Their Miami content, I mean, all their content has been good, but the Miami content has really been on point this season. So, Dalton, we appreciate you. Enjoy the rest of your week, sir.
Appreciate you for watching, as always, Alex. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll talk to everyone next time on another episode of Locked On Canes. We are part of the awesome Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.